Have you ever felt so overwhelmed with thoughts, worries about the future, and pain from the past that you can barely breathe? As if your mind is full of noise, a veritable storm of ideas, fears, and doubts, and the simple act of being present seems like an impossible challenge? Maybe you are living with the constant feeling that everything is out of control. Anxiety consumes you, and relationships seem increasingly difficult to manage. Now, imagine if you could learn a way to step back, quiet that inner turmoil for a bit, and simply be there in the present moment. Imagine, for a moment, being able to observe your mind without getting lost in it, without being swallowed up by emotions, and still find peace and clarity, even in the most difficult moments. This is the power of Prosoche, a profound practice from Stoic philosophy that teaches you to cultivate a mindfulness that goes beyond simple observation. It is more than just being present. Prosoche is the ability to be aware of what is happening around you and within you with awareness and intention, without giving into automatic reactions or external distractions. But what exactly does Prosoche mean? In simple terms, Prosoche is the practice of mindfulness in the context of Stoicism. It is the ability to focus our mind, thoughts, and actions in a clear and focused way, without getting lost in the distractions of the world or the emotional storms that often overwhelm us. Unlike other forms of mindfulness, which often focus solely on meditation or relaxation, Prosoche is a continuous state of mental alertness, a constant discipline of bringing our mind back to what really matters. In Stoic philosophy, this practice is essential to cultivating a life of virtue, wisdom, and serenity. It allows us to realize that true peace comes not from controlling the world around us, but from controlling our reaction to what happens. And the key to this control is learning to see the world clearly, without the distorted lenses of our fears, desires, or prejudices. And that's exactly what we're going to explore here. In the following chapters, we will discover how Prosoche can transform the way you think, deal with emotions, and even improve your relationships. We will learn how, by bringing your full attention to the present, you can find the balance you seek. We will learn to be more aware of what really matters and not to get lost in the distractions that take away our inner peace. This journey begins with a simple but powerful step: understanding the origin of Prosoche and what it means in the context of Stoicism. Because when you understand its root, you can begin to practice it authentically and deeply in your life. Now that you have an overview of Prosoche and its transformative power, let's travel back in time and understand how this concept emerged at the heart of Stoic philosophy, how great thinkers like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius taught about the importance of mindfulness for a fulfilling life. Come with me, and let's explore the origins of it all. Now that you have an idea of what Prosoche is, let's go back in time to understand how this concept gained strength in Stoic philosophy and what it meant to the masters of antiquity. Stoic philosophers believed that true happiness depended not on what was happening around us, but on how we responded to the world. They knew that the human mind was full of distractions, and that many of our most intense emotions and reactions arose from our inability to focus clearly on the present. This was how suffering began, and so the concept of mindfulness, or Prosoche, became central to Stoic philosophy. Epictetus, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, taught that the human mind should be like a soldier in battle, vigilant, attentive to every movement and reaction. He believed that it was essential to maintain control over one's thoughts and emotions, because only then could we achieve true freedom, an inner freedom that did not depend on external circumstances. In his teachings, Epictetus emphasized the importance of cultivating a constant awareness of one's thoughts, so that we do not get carried away by impulses or the influence of external factors. For him, this was not a simple skill, but a daily practice, a constant effort to bring the mind back to the present moment. He said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you respond to what happens to you that matters." This is Prosoche in action. focusing the mind on what is within our control without getting lost in feelings of despair or worrying about what we cannot change. Another great Stoic thinker, Seneca, also spoke about the importance of prosoche in everyday life. He believed that mindfulness was the key to living virtuously, free from distractions that take us away from our purpose. For Seneca, practicing prosoche meant observing our actions, our thoughts, and even our words with awareness and clarity, always aligned with the values of reason and virtue. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, left perhaps the most profound legacy of prosoche. He wrote in his meditations that the secret to inner peace was the ability to observe oneself and the world around us with an objective and calm gaze, without being carried away by the emotions of the moment. He believed that by keeping our minds alert and attentive, we could live in accordance with nature in a wiser and more balanced way. Marcus Aurelius said, "The mind that concentrates on the present is unbeatable." These great philosophers didn't just propose an abstract concept of mindfulness, but saw it as an essential practice for dealing with life's challenges. For them, prosoche wasn't just about meditation or silence. It was about keeping our minds disciplined and focused on our true nature, which in turn allowed us to live a more fulfilled and balanced life. Today, the practice of prosoche can be seen as a predecessor to modern mindfulness, but with a deeper focus on accepting the present moment without getting lost in judgments or automatic reactions. And as we will see, this practice has immense power in reducing anxiety, improving relationships, and cultivating a more serene and fulfilled life. In a world where distractions are everywhere and where we are constantly pressured to live in the future or dwell on the past, living in the present moment can seem nearly impossible. Anxiety about what's to come, fear of making mistakes, worries about what's already happened. All of these take up space in our minds, pulling us away from the reality of the present. But what the Stoic philosophers taught us is that the present is the only moment we truly have control over. And that's exactly where prosoche comes in. Living in the present is not just a nice piece of advice, it is a life practice. Prosoche teaches us to focus all our attention on what really matters in the moment, without letting the past or the future steal our peace. How can we be more present when our mind is always far away, projecting itself to what has happened or what might happen? This disconnection from the present is the root of much of the anxiety and emotional suffering we feel. When we practice prosoche, we learn to anchor our mind in the now. We learn to see each moment as it is, without the need to judge it or change it into something else. This acceptance of the present moment, with all its ups and downs, is what allows us to live with greater inner peace. Instead of getting lost in the stresses of the future or the hurts of the past, we become able to enjoy what we have now. And that is one of the greatest sources of freedom we can achieve. Epictetus once said that the things that trouble us are not the things themselves, but the way we see them. And this vision is transformed when we are able to be in the present, free from the distorted lens of our expectations and fears. When we are aware of what we are experiencing, we can respond to what is happening around us in a calmer, more balanced, and less reactive way. And best of all, practicing prosoche is an accessible tool that can transform even the most difficult moments. Imagine, for example, being in the midst of a period of great anxiety, and instead of letting yourself be consumed by future thoughts, you simply bring your attention to your breathing, to your senses, to the moment itself. You become present in your experience, and this change of focus, as simple as it may seem, can bring a profound sense of relief. This is the power of prosoche, the ability to be in the present moment with body and soul, without getting carried away by the whirlwind of worries that dominate our mind. When you start paying attention to the present moment, you start to notice patterns and reactions within yourself that you previously overlooked. Let's explore how this can bring you greater self-awareness and transformation. Too often, we live our lives on autopilot, reacting to events without really understanding what's going on inside us. Our minds are so busy, always on the move, thinking about what's next, rehashing what's past, that we barely notice the patterns that govern our emotions and decisions. This is especially true for those of us who struggle with anxiety or depression, where our minds seem to be constantly on overdrive. What Prosoche teaches us is that when we direct our full attention to the present, we begin to notice things that were previously out of our reach. Automatic thoughts, recurring emotions, unrecognized fears. When we become more attentive and vigilant, we begin to see our reactions without judgment and understand why they are there. For example, have you ever noticed how your mind can project into the future and create worrying scenarios? Or how, in a conversation, you can get swept up in an emotional impulse without really thinking about the situation? These patterns are not random. They are automatic responses to internal and external stimuli that we have learned throughout our lives. However, by practicing Prosoche, we begin to identify these patterns, become more aware of how we are reacting, and can then consciously decide whether we want to follow that path or not. Epictetus, one of the philosophers who most emphasized the importance of Prosoche, believed that only self-understanding would allow us to achieve true freedom. He said that it is not what happens to you, but how you react to what happens to you that defines your life. This means that by understanding the roots of our thoughts and behaviors, we can choose how we react to situations, rather than being enslaved by these automatic reactions. Over time, practicing Prosoche helps us cultivate deep self-awareness. You begin to notice when you are being impulsive, anxious, or defensive, and you have the opportunity to break those cycles. This doesn't mean being perfect or error-free, but it does mean that you are increasingly in control of your mind and your choices. And that in itself is a powerful form of self-transformation. By recognizing your mental patterns, you become better able to make decisions that align with your values and goals. Prosoche offers a lens through which we can observe and therefore understand our mind, so that we can respond in a more balanced and conscious way. The power of being in the present is not just about mental clarity, but also about finding inner peace, especially in times of crisis. Anxiety, that inner turmoil that seems to take over your mind, is one of the biggest struggles many people face today. Being stuck in thoughts about the future, unresolved fears, and catastrophic scenarios that don't exist but become so real in your mind can be paralyzing. An anxious mind is often like a turbulent river. You try to swim against the current, but the pressure seems too much, and the feeling of being out of control is overwhelming. Here, Prosoche comes in as a powerful practice to break this cycle of overthinking. When we are constantly projecting our minds into the future or reliving the past, our minds become overwhelmed and anxiety intensifies. Prosoche teaches us to bring our attention back to the present, to focus on what is happening now, without getting lost in our projections or fears. Imagine that you are in the midst of an anxiety episode. Your mind starts racing. Your thoughts multiply, and you feel trapped, unable to escape the spiral of worry. In this moment, rather than fighting against your thoughts or trying to force your mind to stop, Prosoche practice guides you to simply observe these thoughts without identifying with them. By observing your thoughts, you can begin to realize that, although they may seem intense, they are just thoughts, not reality. Epictetus reminded us that we cannot control what happens, but we can control our response. By focusing on the present, we can stop the flow of anxious thoughts and take a break, allowing mental tension to dissipate. The simple act of breathing deeply, observing our surroundings, and noticing the small details of the moment can help to ease this emotional burden and bring immediate relief. Furthermore, Prosoche helps us accept that anxiety is a part of the human experience, but it doesn't have to dominate us. When we are aware of the present moment, we learn to observe anxiety without letting it consume us. It loses its power over us because we are no longer its prisoners. We are observers with the freedom to decide how to respond. Practicing Prosoche regularly is like training your mind. The more you focus on the present, the more capable you become of controlling your mind in moments of stress. This doesn't mean that anxiety will disappear completely, but it does mean that you will have the tools to deal with it in a healthier, more balanced way. When we are more aware of the present moment, we are more connected and present to others, creating stronger and healthier bonds. Speaking of connection, let's talk about mindfulness in relationships. Relationships are undoubtedly one of the most challenging aspects of human life. The way we connect with others has a profound impact on our emotional and psychological well-being. In an increasingly fast-paced and disconnected world, practicing Prosoche, mindfulness, can be a key to improving the quality of our interactions and creating deeper, more meaningful bonds. When we are fully present in a relationship, we are not only physically present with someone, but also emotionally and mentally available. Unfortunately, in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, we often find ourselves distracted, thinking about other things, or even caught up in our own fears and anxieties without really paying attention to the person in front of us. This can create misunderstandings, feelings of disconnection, and even emotional withdrawal. Practicing Prosoche teaches us to focus our attention on the present moment and on the other person, which is an important step in improving any type of relationship. Imagine you're in a conversation with a friend or partner, and instead of getting lost in thoughts about what you're going to say next or the worries of your day, you actively listen. You start to notice more details about what the other person is saying, their body language, their emotions, and even what they're not saying in words. This creates an environment for deeper, more genuine communication. Additionally, practicing self-awareness during interactions is also essential. Often, our emotional reactions during a conflict or conversation are automatic, based on old beliefs or unresolved fears. By practicing Prosoche, we can observe these feelings without identifying with them, and then respond in a more reflective and empathetic way. This reduces the chances of us reacting impulsively and allows for more open and constructive communication. From a Stoic perspective, mindfulness is also about understanding that we cannot control the actions of others, but we can control how we react. Prosoche helps us remember that each person is an individual with their own perceptions and emotions, and that our response should be a conscious choice, not an impulsive reaction. This puts us in a place of greater inner peace, which in turn improves the quality of our relationships. Prosoche's impact on relationships isn't limited to being more present during conversations. It also involves a greater understanding of others' needs and emotions, which strengthens empathy. When we become more attentive, we can more easily recognize when someone needs support or when we are being inattentive, which makes us better able to respond to the other person's needs. Ultimately, Prosoche teaches us to be more compassionate and to see others more clearly, without the distortions caused by anxiety, judgments, or expectations. This kind of mindfulness creates a safe space for true emotional connection, which is essential for any healthy relationship. When we talk about mental health, the first thing that comes to mind is our ability to deal with our emotions, thoughts, and everyday situations without them overwhelming us. In a world marked by external and internal pressures where anxiety, stress, and depression have become common concerns, the feeling of being out of control emotionally can often consume us. Fortunately, the practice of Prosoche, or mindfulness, offers a way to restore peace of mind and cultivate greater emotional stability. Prosoche teaches us to observe our thoughts and feelings objectively, without judging them or identifying with them. This creates a mental space where we can stop and breathe, away from the automatic reactions that often dominate our minds. When we practice mindfulness, we begin to realize that we are not our thoughts. We simply experience them. This is crucial for those who suffer from conditions such as anxiety and depression, as these emotional states often arise when we over-identify with negative or catastrophic thoughts. Imagine being in the middle of a thought like, I'm not good enough, or this is going to go wrong. The natural tendency is to let these thoughts consume us, which will grow in intensity and make us feel worse. However, when we practice Prosoche, we can see these thoughts from the outside, as if we were watching a movie. This emotional distance is crucial to prevent the mind from falling into a vicious cycle of negativity. By being present, we can reprogram our minds to respond in healthier ways. Stoicism teaches us that emotions are not good or bad in and of themselves, but that it is our reaction to them that defines their impact on us. Prosoche allows us to see these emotions more clearly, understand their origins, and thereby change our response to them. For example, if we feel angry, we can realize that this anger is a reaction to something that has happened, and instead of letting it dominate our actions, we can simply observe it, accept that it is there, and choose not to react impulsively. When we do this, the practice of Prosoche helps to reduce mental and emotional overload, bringing about inner balance. This does not mean that emotional challenges disappear, but that with continued practice, our ability to deal with these challenges improves significantly. As Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not over events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Practicing Prosoche has the potential to increase our emotional resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back quickly from life's challenges. And this practice allows us to remain calm even in adversity, as we learn to focus on what we can control and let go of what is beyond our reach. Now that we've explored how Prosoche can impact our mental health, let's look at how this practice can also help us deal with depression. By deepening our understanding of how mindfulness can transform the way we perceive emotional distress, we can learn to walk more lightly, even in the most difficult moments. Depression is one of the biggest emotional challenges many people face, and its impact can be devastating, affecting every aspect of life. Those living with depression often feel overwhelmed by feelings of constant sadness, hopelessness, and a loss of interest in things that once brought them pleasure. In this state of mind, it's easy to get caught up in a cycle of negative thoughts, with the mind stuck in the past or anxious about the future. Practicing Prosoche can be a powerful tool in combating depression because it teaches us to bring our minds back to the present moment, rather than getting caught up in rumination and worry. When we're depressed, we tend to focus on what went wrong or what could go wrong. We think about our mistakes, failures, and fears, which only fuels the spiral of negativity. Practicing mindfulness offers us a way to break this cycle of rumination by helping us focus on our experience in the moment, without judgment. One way Prosoche can help alleviate symptoms of depression is by promoting acceptance. Rather than fighting negative emotions or trying to push them away, mindfulness teaches us to observe them objectively, allowing ourselves to feel them without getting lost in them. When we accept sadness or anxiety as part of the human experience, without trying to reject or deny them, we begin to create a space where we can deal with these emotions with more clarity. Practicing Prosoche teaches us to realize that we are not our feelings. When we over-identify with our emotions, we believe that they define who we are, which can intensify feelings of helplessness. But by practicing mindfulness, we learn to see our emotions as temporary, as something that comes and goes. This realization can be liberating, as it helps us understand that our sadness, no matter how deep it is not permanent and does not define our worth as a person. When we focus our attention on the present moment, we also have the opportunity to redirect our thoughts to something more positive and constructive. Instead of getting lost in our worries, we can focus our mind on something simple and pleasant, such as our breathing, the sensations in our body, or the sounds around us. This practice helps restore a sense of control over our mind, which is essential for those struggling with depression. Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "Sadness is not a disease. It is a natural part of life." With Prosoche, we learn to deal with sadness and pain in a healthier way, without letting them consume us. While we cannot completely avoid moments of suffering, we can learn to face them in a more balanced way and with greater mental clarity. In this way, Prosoche teaches us to have compassion for ourselves. People with depression are often hard on themselves, blaming themselves for their emotions or for not being able to get over their pain. Practicing mindfulness helps us to be kinder to ourselves, to approach our own difficulties with understanding, and to cultivate the patience necessary for the recovery process. Anxiety is the body's natural response to stress, but when it becomes excessive and chronic, it can paralyze our lives. Those who suffer from anxiety often find themselves trapped in a cycle of worrying about the future, often without control over their own thoughts. An anxious mind is a mind that jumps from one worry to the next, creating a constant cycle of fear and apprehension. In this context, Prosoche, the Stoic practice of mindfulness, can be an effective way to break this cycle. By practicing Prosoche, we are able to focus our attention on the present moment, the here and now, rather than on the uncertain future or the what-ifs that generate so much anxiety. The practice of being fully present allows us to interrupt the flow of automatic thoughts that feed anxiety, creating a mental space in which we can breathe and observe our fears without being overwhelmed by them. By focusing our attention on our breathing, our posture, or any other aspect of the present moment, we create a pause between thinking and reacting. This allows us to choose how we respond to our thoughts, rather than reacting impulsively to them. In Stoicism, there is a fundamental concept of distinguishing between what is within our control and what is not. Anxiety often stems from worrying about what we cannot control: the future, the opinions of others, unpredictable events. Prosoche teaches us to redirect our attention to what we can control: our mind, our thoughts, our reactions. Practicing Prosoche also helps us realize that many of our fears are based on assumptions or catastrophizing. When we observe our thoughts more clearly, we can see that many of our worries have no basis in reality. This doesn't mean that challenges and difficulties don't exist, but that we are able to deal with them more calmly, rather than allowing ourselves to be consumed by irrational thoughts. Additionally, practicing being present in the moment can help reduce the hyper-alertness that is common in people with anxiety. Anxiety often keeps us in a constant state of alert, as if we are always on the edge of imminent danger. By practicing mindfulness, we are able to slow down and restore balance, reminding ourselves that the present moment is the only one in which we can truly act. Over time, Prosoche helps to cultivate a calmer, more centered mind, which significantly reduces anxiety levels and increases our ability to deal with life's challenges. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus says, "Man is not disturbed by things, but by the opinion he has of them." With Prosoche, we change the way we look at the world and, in turn, our emotional response to it. In a world full of distractions, staying focused on a task for a long period of time can be one of the biggest challenges. This isn't for lack of effort or willpower, but because we're constantly bombarded with notifications, scattered thoughts, and the constant pressure to multitask. The practice of Prosoche, Stoic mindfulness, can help combat these challenges by teaching us to consciously and intentionally bring our attention to the present. When we apply Prosoche to our work or daily activities, we are able to dive deeper into tasks and complete them more efficiently. This is because by focusing on the moment, we avoid fragmenting our attention. Often, our productivity is compromised by constant shifts in focus, looking at our phones, checking emails, or letting irrelevant thoughts distract us from the task at hand. With Prosoche, we can combat these interruptions by establishing a mental space where we are fully engaged in what we are doing. The practice also allows us to approach tasks in a calmer, more deliberate way. When we become aware of what we are doing, we have greater control over our energy and concentration, avoiding burnout and mental overload. The clarity that comes with Prosoche helps us prioritize what is truly important and focus on the process, not just the outcome. Another benefit of applying Prosoche in our daily lives is that it teaches us to approach failure and mistakes in a more constructive way. When we are deeply immersed in the present, we are able to deal with challenges in a more balanced way. Instead of being overcome by frustration or guilt over a mistake, mindfulness allows us to see these situations as learning opportunities, without judging our worth as a person based on our performance. Practicing Prosoche allows us to cultivate greater presence, which directly translates into increased productivity. This happens because we are able to focus on what really matters, without being consumed by distractions or anxiety about the future. With more mindfulness on our tasks, we are able to dedicate the time and energy necessary to carry them out in the best possible way. As the Stoics emphasize in their philosophies, to act virtuously is to act with focus. When we are able to be present in the moment, we are able to deliver the best of ourselves, whether in our work or in our relationships. Through the ongoing practice of Prosoche, we can cultivate a more productive, less fragmented, and more satisfying life. While the practice of Prosoche offers transformative benefits, it is not without its challenges. The biggest challenge many people face when trying to implement mindfulness into their lives is undoubtedly distraction. We live in a world of constant interruptions, from the incessant stream of information and notifications to our own restless thoughts. In a fast-paced society, it is difficult to find a moment to simply be present without being swept away by external and internal demands. The first barrier is mental distraction. Even when we try to focus on something, our minds can wander to a myriad of worries about work, relationships, the future. This can make us feel like we're failing at our Prosoche practice, leading to frustration. However, this is a natural part of the process. The human mind is prone to wandering, and the Stoic philosophers were well aware of this. Epictetus teaches us that rather than fighting these thoughts, we should acknowledge them without holding on to them. Another common barrier is impatience. When we start practicing Prosoche, we expect immediate visible results. Greater calm, more focus, more emotional control. However, true mindfulness practice is not something that happens overnight. It requires patience and perseverance, because the internal transformation it promotes is gradual. If we try to rush the process, we end up creating more frustration and anxiety. Resistance to discomfort can be a hindrance. Mindfulness requires us to be aware of what's going on inside us, and often this means facing painful emotions or difficult experiences. Rather than running away from these feelings, Prosoche teaches us to embrace them. However, this process of confronting our emotions can be uncomfortable, especially for those who are struggling with anxiety, depression, or other emotional difficulties. Another big challenge is lack of time. Busy schedules and busy lives make it hard to find moments to practice mindfulness. When we're overwhelmed, it can feel like practicing Prosoche is a luxury or a task that can be put off until later. However, the Stoics remind us that every moment in our lives offers an opportunity to practice. Prosoche doesn't have to be something separate from our daily routine. It can be incorporated into every action and thought, every interaction and challenge. The good news is that, like any other skill, the challenges of practicing Prosoche can be overcome with the right approach. The first step is to embrace imperfection. It's okay to lose focus or get distracted. The practice is about coming back to the present moment whenever your mind wanders. By understanding that distractions are a normal part of the journey, we can learn to be kinder to ourselves and, as a result, more persistent. Prosoche practice is to start small. Instead of trying to spend hours practicing, you can start with short, focused moments, such as 5 or 10 minutes of mindfulness throughout the day. These moments can be incorporated into everyday activities, such as having a coffee, commuting to work, or reading a book. Gradually, as your practice becomes more solid, you can expand the amount of time you dedicate to it. Patience is one of the pillars of Stoic philosophy. Living in accordance with nature and understanding that change takes time is essential. If you feel like you're not seeing immediate results, remember that Prosoche is a journey, not a destination. Every small step toward the present is a victory, and every moment we can focus our mind is progress. To overcome resistance to discomfort, it's helpful to practice accepting difficult emotions instead of fighting them. We can observe them with curiosity and compassion. This doesn't mean ignoring them or drowning them out, but rather allowing them to exist without our minds getting lost in them. With time and consistent practice, mindfulness becomes a natural part of our lives. Prosoche is not a separate task or exercise, but a way of living in the present moment with greater awareness and serenity. When we face emotional crises, whether it's a loss, a breakup, an illness, or even a period of depression, it's common for our emotions to overwhelm us. We feel as if we're being swept along by a whirlwind of feelings with no control or direction. At these times, the practice of Prosoche can be a powerful anchor, helping us find stability even in the most turbulent waters. Stoicism, on the other hand, has always emphasized that while we cannot control external events, we can always control our response to them. Prosoche, by teaching us to live in the present, allows us to stop and observe our emotions without being overwhelmed by them. Rather than getting lost in worries about the future or regrets about the past, mindfulness encourages us to observe the present moment and focus on what is possible right now, without judgment or despair. When we're in the midst of a crisis, our thoughts and emotions can feel overwhelming. Anxiety about what's to come, grief over loss, fear of the future. These feelings can paralyze us. However, Prosoche teaches us that the practice of bringing our attention to the present moment can help ease some of that burden. When we can focus on what we're doing right now, we can find temporary relief from the emotional intensity, even if we can't solve the problem right away. For example, if we are dealing with the grief of losing a loved one, instead of allowing the grief to consume us, we can practice Prosoche by observing the grief with compassion. Instead of getting caught up in a cycle of thinking about what we could have done or what the future holds, we can simply be with the grief, acknowledging it without judgment. This creates a much-needed pause, allowing us to experience the grief without getting stuck in it. In times of crisis, it can be easy to be tempted to run away from difficult emotions or to distract ourselves with destructive behaviors. However, Prosoche teaches us that true healing comes from accepting what is happening and being fully present to it. This does not mean that we will like the pain or that it will go away, but that we learn to live with it in a healthier way, without letting it dominate our minds and actions. Even in the most difficult moments, Prosoche teaches us to focus on what we can control, our attitude, our response, and the way we choose to deal with the situation. This not only reduces suffering, but also strengthens us, because by being present, we can find meaning in learning from experiences, even the most painful ones. While the practice of Prosoche offers immediate relief in moments of crisis, its greatest benefit is revealed over time, as it begins to shape our minds and behaviors in lasting ways. The true power of Stoic mindfulness lies in the cumulative impact it has on our mental and emotional health, creating a solid foundation of resilience that allows us to face life's challenges with greater serenity and wisdom. Stoic philosophy teaches us that hardship is inevitable. Rather than trying to avoid suffering, Stoicism teaches us to prepare for it, to cultivate the emotional resilience needed to navigate difficult times with dignity and control. Prosoche thus becomes a daily practice that helps us maintain a balanced mind, regardless of external circumstances. It teaches us to respond rather than react, a key skill in preventing the buildup of stress and anxiety over time. By practicing mindfulness regularly, we begin to develop greater self-awareness. We come to know ourselves better and to see our patterns of thought and behavior more clearly. Instead of being swept away by our emotions and impulsive reactions, we learn to recognize warning signs and deal with them more effectively. This not only improves our ability to cope with crises, but also helps us prevent episodes of anxiety or other conditions that can arise due to the accumulation of stress and unrecognized pressures. When we are able to focus our attention on the present and observe our emotions without identifying with them, we begin to break the cycle of automatic negative thoughts that fuel anxiety and depression. Regular practice of Prosoche teaches us that suffering is often related to how we react to our thoughts and not necessarily to what is happening around us. By cultivating the ability to observe without judgment, we learn to slow down these automatic mental cycles that drag us into emotional chaos. Mental health is not something we can cure once and for all. Just like physical health, it requires ongoing maintenance. By consistently applying Prosoche, we can cultivate a more balanced mind that is able to withstand life's ups and downs. This daily practice helps prevent emotional burnout and creates a healthier, more resilient mental environment in which we are less vulnerable to the impact of stress and anxiety. The key to long-term mental health with Prosoche is consistency. By incorporating mindfulness practice into our daily lives, we transform an act of mindfulness into a powerful tool for lasting mental health. It's not necessary to dedicate hours to meditation. The real practice is cultivating mindfulness in every moment. This can be done in small, everyday actions. When eating, when walking, when listening to someone, when doing daily tasks. Additionally, the simple act of stopping and breathing for a few seconds in the midst of a busy routine can have a profound effect. It creates moments of pause where we can align our minds, acknowledge what we're feeling, and at the same time, refocus our attention on the present. The practice of Prosoche teaches us that the present moment is the only moment we truly have. And when we are fully present, we can live with greater clarity, purpose, and ease. In the long run, regular practice of Prosoche translates into a more balanced and harmonious life. The emotional resilience it cultivates makes us less susceptible to being overwhelmed by adversity. Although life's challenges will still occur, we will be better prepared to face them with serenity and wisdom, knowing that no matter what happens, we can always choose how to react. The journey we have taken so far has shown us how the practice of Prosoche, Stoic mindfulness, is a powerful tool for facing life's difficulties with greater serenity, clarity, and emotional control. We have seen how this practice not only helps us deal with immediate emotional crises, but also builds a solid foundation of resilience that protects us over time, improving our mental health and the quality of our relationships. By focusing on the present moment and becoming a conscious observer of our thoughts and emotions, we can break the cycle of anxiety, stress, and impulsive reactions. Instead of being overwhelmed by the emotional turmoil, we learn to respond with balance and wisdom, bringing more inner peace into our daily lives. But true transformation begins within ourselves. As we have seen throughout this video, practicing Prosoche is not something that can be done once and for all. It is a daily practice that requires patience and consistency. However, over time, the benefits become clear. A calmer mind, a lighter heart, and a life more focused on what really matters. Stoicism teaches us that inner peace does not depend on external circumstances, but rather on how we choose to respond to them. And Prosoche, the practice of living in the present with mindfulness, is key to cultivating this choice every day. No matter what life throws at us, we always have a choice in how we respond. Now more than ever, we need tools to help us cope with the fast pace of modern life and the constant emotional pressures. Prosoche is that tool. By bringing mindfulness into our daily lives, we can live with greater clarity, balance, and purpose. Prosoche practice. Start small. Take a few minutes each day to observe your emotions, to be present in your interactions, and to stop in the middle of your routine and simply breathe and observe. Over time, you will notice a subtle but powerful shift in the way you respond to the world around you. Remember that the path to balance and inner peace is not easy, but it is infinitely rewarding. By integrating Prosoche into your life, You will not only be cultivating a more peaceful mind, but you will also be strengthening your ability to deal with life's adversities with grace and wisdom. I hope this video has provided you with not only insight into the practice of Prosoche, but also inspiration for you to start applying it in your daily life. If you're looking for more resources to strengthen your mental and emotional health, keep exploring Stoicism, because as the ancient Stoics knew, true peace comes from within. And now, one last question. How can you apply the practice of Prosoche in your life? Leave your thoughts or any questions you may have on the subject in the comments. I would love to hear your experience and follow your progress on this journey of self-knowledge and transformation. Take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and remember, true freedom lies in our ability to be fully present.